So welcome to COSTAATT and our Innovation Café Series. The COSTAATT Innovation Café Series is a monthly event that takes place at COSTAATT where we discuss issues that are affecting us not only within the Caribbean, but then also across the globe, issues that are aligned to our COSTAATT agenda and to our COSTAATT programs. For those of you who do not know COSTAATT, COSTAATT is the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary in 2025. And as part of our celebrations, we are having a number of public outreach activities and webinars and information sessions, such as the Innovation Café Series. We're more than happy to have you here for today's webinar, dealing with healthy aging. And we invite you as well in advance to next month's webinar, which takes place on the last Wednesday of the month, July 30th. And with that, we're dealing with ESG. All right, so environment, sustainability, and governance. All right, today we have a fantastic panel of speakers from across the Caribbean as we deal and address with the issue of healthy aging. And in terms of the panel, we do have Sanita Belgrave-King, Dr. Sanita Belgrave-King, who is a family medicine and geriatric specialist out of Bahamas. We have Dr. Chelsea Garcia, who is the CEO of Live Health and a palliative medicine consultant. And then we also have Wanda Williams, who is a gerontologist. So we thank all our speakers, our panelists, for being here with us today. My name is Fayola Nicholas, and I am the Vice President of Institutional Advancement here at COSTAATT. Right? So to kick things off with the questions, I'm going to ask you all first question, and even though I'm asking questions, for those who have questions from the attendees, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We will be checking the chat throughout the day and giving these questions to you as well, giving your questions to the panelists. And for those of you who may be trying to join or who may have friends who are joining and unable to join, we do have a capacity of 300 persons within the room. I see that we are already at 262. So those who are not able to join, they can actually join us online on our Facebook page. All right, so just a reminder, place your questions in the chat, and those who are unable to join in the room, you can also check it on Facebook. It is being live streamed. All right, so panelists, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us here this lunchtime in order to share your information and your expertise. So the first question that I have really deals with the Caribbean region. The Caribbean region is rapidly aging, and with a proportion of those 60 and over rising, and in 2000, it was an amount of approximately 10%, and then in 2015, it was 14%, and we anticipate that by 2050, it's going to reach 25%. So we are definitely rapidly aging. This demographic shift makes the concept of healthy aging even more critical. So to begin, how would each of you define healthy aging beyond simply the absence of illness? And I'd like to start off perhaps with Wanda Williams.
Well, thanks a lot, Fayola. For me, I look at it more as successful aging as opposed to healthy aging. And so to define it, I would use it as a life course kind of a term. So we're looking at aging over the life course and how it's impacted by our lifestyle and life course choices. That you start these choices as well in our early years. So it's really achieving, it's maintaining, it's continuously improving, it's continuously modifying our behaviors to manage our physical and our mental health. It's to manage how we maintain our independence, how we maintain our autonomy, and just basically how we manage our quality of life. So it's a reflection of how we would interact with our environment, how we would interact with in our relationships, how we interact with society, how we interact even with ourselves, and how these interactions contribute to our aging experience.
Okay, so maybe I could bring in a regional perspective here from Dr. Sanita Belgrave-King. Perhaps you can tell us how do you define healthy aging?
So that was a great response by Williams. And so healthy aging, as she said, kind of varies. The first thing she said that was so important is a lifelong process. It doesn't happen overnight or just over a few weeks. And this is something that's happening from the time we are born until the time we die. And basically what we're trying to do is to optimize a patient's functional ability and their well-being as they age. And so we're looking at their physical health. Are they engaging in meaningful activities? We're looking at their social. Are they having nurturing relationships, their mental, their emotional well-being? And so, as you rightfully said, it's not the absence of disease, but rather about increasing their quality of life and maintaining independence. I think that's the way that I will define the healthy aging.
Okay, I like that, maintaining independence. So I'd like to bring in Dr. Chelsea Garcia to get maybe what your perspective is on this with the definition.
Yeah, so everything that you both said, I really second it. For me, as people age, I think one of the biggest challenges I see now, to add to what has already been said, is the social well-being and the interconnectivity that we all have. And to put that into a Caribbean context where family and cultural identity play central roles, it really is to make sure that we adapt with our aging to continue to support persons so that they will have meaningful relationships and truly stay active in their community. Aging with connection and also aging with purpose. And I think, to add to what Wanda Williams said, that is successful aging. And I think that's something that really needs to be incorporated beyond the physical, the mental, the emotional. It's really important, the social aspect.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I really like that. So given that the median age in Latin America and the Caribbean region is projected to reach approximately 40 by 2050, signifying a rapidly maturing population, what do you think are the most critical foundational habits or lifestyle choices that persons or individuals in their 40s, 50s, and younger should prioritize now to significantly impact on their healthy aging journey later on in life? And maybe I could start. Yes, Wanda, if you'd like to take this off.
Sure. Well, as you said in that question, or even younger, I think that is the key. Those are the key words, even younger, because 40, 50, you're already starting to experience things that you did in your teens and your 20s. So we need to start, as Dr. Sanita Belgrave-King said, you start from the moment you're born. You have to make better choices. We have to be careful about what we put into our bodies. We have to be careful about the activities that we indulge in, not getting enough rest. All these things really create that foundation for what you will be reaping when you get older. So we really have to keep those things in mind, that it is the choices that we make as young people that impact our aging experience.
Okay.
And just to piggyback on that, she said the foundation, and that's what it is. These foundational habits, if our foundation isn't solid, we're going to crumble as we age. And so, she alluded to things like healthy food and nutrition. We all know what that means, but how much of us are actually putting it into practice? Finding that balance between those micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, and those macronutrients, your carbohydrates, your fats, your proteins. We also have to look at exercise. If you're not engaging in exercise, how are you going to have, strong bones and strong muscles? Are we getting adequate sleep? There's so much jobs that don't allow for adequate sleep because of either being a night shift, or as physicians, you're working 24 hours. And so now it needs to be a full overhaul of, what are the expectations of a workforce? What are the expectations of a society? Things like managing stress. And then, what we as physicians like to do, regular health screenings. When last have you seen a physician because you were well? We always run when we are ill, but when you are well, do you go to get those checkups? So I feel as though those are the foundational habits that are going to have the biggest impact on us when we get older.
And to add to that, I mean, if I can think of my experience with my own patients as they age, adding on mental stimulation. and those, again, strong social ties and community involvement. As we age, that is so important to keep us healthy. So we're talking about the body being healthy. We have to talk about the mind being healthy, and the mind being able to rise to the challenges of aging. A lot of my patients are very independent persons, some of them very successful. And as they age, they have a lot of difficulty because maybe they have more limitations than they had before. And it's really actually pivoting on that and using your mindset to overcome that. And for the patients that are able to use their mindset to overcome that and able to say, yes, I'm doing all these things right. I'm taking care of my health in the best way I can. I'm rising above these limitations now to be successful at aging. And the more I see that community involvement and those persons that have really redefining their purpose now in their older years, they continue to live and to truly live well.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Garcia, I think that's a fantastic point that you would have made. And I just want to remind patients that you can put your questions in the chat. And after we've gone through a few of these questions that we have, we will refer to your questions as well. So feel free, if you have questions, to add it to the chat. But as Dr. Garcia was talking about that mental state as you are maturing, so beyond the physical health, maintaining sharp cognitive function and robust mental well-being is paramount. What are some of the effective practices or approaches our audience can adopt or share with loved ones in order to support brain health and emotional resilience as they age? And maybe Chelsea, if you can, since you brought up the emotional.
What I can add to that, I mean, I would say that I tend to like my patients to work until, right? And that work doesn't also always reflect the work that your job, your career, right? But when I say work, I mean, even after you've retired, what ideally for that mental stimulation gives you purpose? What ideally gives you connectivity? And that might come from gardening. That might come from walking. That might come from playing dominoes, right? And I think the answer to that is consistency. And that's the hardest part, because you could rise up today and say, okay, I'm going to be my best self. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to do everything Dr. Garcia said. And then 2 weeks later, I did it, you know? So it's really working on that consistency. And I could speak for all of us. Consistency is hard. I myself need a prescription of consistency. And that is truly, for me, I think, the magic ingredient to truly successfully aging.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
So
Agreed. Definitely that building of resilience, that the ability to, because during the life course, we're gonna, things gonna happen. We're gonna experience trauma and adversity and loss, especially as we get older. We're going to experience that loss, and sometimes it's of that spouse that you've been with for forever. But how do you build that emotional, that resilience that lets you bounce back, as Chelsea was saying? So I think that's so important that we focus on the things that build us and keep us resilient, because that is the way to successfully age, to be able to get over and keep moving, keep going, and keep being positive and optimistic and hopeful with everything that's happening.
And not try to fit into a box either.
Correct.
Because you are your own person, and you can't take somebody else's prescription, because that's truly prescribed for them. So what is your prescription? You know yourself better than anybody else. So take what you know, right? Take what the doctor said, take what you know is the right things. Many of us already know, right? And try to personalize it to yourself, because that's also key.
Absolutely. And just kind of like pulling everything together, when I think of brain health and emotional resilience, it kind of pulls me back to the 4 pillars of healthy aging. And I feel like if we focus on those things while being consistent, we can definitely result in a more emotionally resistant person. So if you think about that first pillar, we've been speaking about it over and over, which looks at physical health. We know about the diet, we know about the exercise, but so often we neglect the sleep, which is something that, I love to emphasize. Now, when you think about the cognitive, you spoke about those dominoes, playing those games that cause some type of mental stimulation. And then from the emotional aspect, how is mindfulness and how is stress reduction playing a part into your life? And then, as Chelsea said earlier, what about that social connection? There's power in being among around people, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's church, whether it's having faith, some type of spiritual connection. There is emotional resilience in having these things together. So when I think about my brain health and I think about emotional resistance, the most thing that stands out to me rather are the 4 pillars of healthy aging.
I think
Absolutely.
that's really good, and I like the way that you put it with the 4 pillars of healthy aging. And I'm hearing the conversation a lot about surrounding yourselves and your community. And as our Caribbean societies experience this demographic shift towards an older population, the structure of our families and communities may also evolve. So
Yes.
within a context like that, and we know that within the Caribbean, we are very community and family oriented. How important really are these social connections and a sense of purpose for healthy aging? And then what proactive roles can individuals and families and communities play in fostering these vital aspects?
Yeah, social connections are so important because we know that people who are isolated or, you don't have that support, you're at a higher risk for depression, loneliness, anxiety, and then these things also contribute to you being, susceptible to developing dementia. And so, everything has a kind of
Domino
snowball
effect.
effect, yeah, and a domino effect. So it's so important, that we try to maintain those social connections and giving people a sense of security. Because when you have these social connections, you also feel a little more secure that there's somebody there if you need it to support you if you have a need. It also affects how you feel about yourself and your mental health and your mental well-being. So it just ties into so many things that social connections really are at the core of, healthy aging and successful aging.
Absolutely. And you made such a good point. So much research has shown the link between isolation, depression, cognitive decline. But, something that we don't talk about is that there's also a link with suicide and increased mortality.
Yeah.
Persons who do not have that sense of belonging, that sense of social connection, they feel like they don't know what their purpose are. And so now sometimes they feel like they have no other choice but to take their life. And so when you think about things that we can do, it starts with the individual. Trying to understand your purpose, you do that by just giving back. You may volunteer, whether it's with according to the culture of the place you are. In the Bahamas, we have things like Kiwanis, we have Rotary Club. That's on an individual level. But as a family now, what are we doing for our elders? I feel as if we need to give back to them and give them their flowers while they're alive, recognize them for their contributions, be respectful of them. When last did you call your older mother or older father? When last did you call your grandparents just to check on them? Are you going to see them? Like, don't let them feel like they're in this world alone. And like at a community level, to understand that your community goes beyond your neighbors. It's not just who lives next to you, but it includes your churches. It includes your extended family, the people who aren't really blood related, but they've turned up and they've shown up over and over. So when you think about social connection, it goes really far. Just quickly, I saw a patient, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and his family brought him in because they thought that he had dementia for screening. And when I would have screened him and we did all the cognitive assessments, he actually was depressed. And the main thing that he kept saying over and over to me was, Doc, as I got older, a lot of my friends were dying. There's nobody, my younger children, they're busy at work. I'm literally at home all the time. And now with my retirement paycheck, I can't pay to play the sports I used to like before because he loved golf. And it just goes to show that, we don't think about it, but as we get older, we get more isolated, whether from, people, everybody being busy, or some people around us just dying. And so we have to think about this social connection from right now.
Yeah. And I think in the Caribbean, where intergenerational living and community life has been our traditional strengths, right?
Yeah.
We have to protect and we have to adapt these connections, because also in the Caribbean, we do have a stigma against nursing homes. And it's really understanding that we are within an aging community, and how can we innovate and build and educate to truly adapt those structures to support. I mean, Dr. Belgrave-King is talking about her patient. These are things that we need to build out to them, for them, to really foster that social connection into the future. But also, we also need to think about the persons that are their family members, essentially the caregivers, their unit, their social unit. How do we support them as well? We're saying that in 2050, 25% of the population is going to be aging.
Yeah.
And that to me is something very serious, because I'm thinking about the other 75%, because it's the other 75% that are now supporting that 25%.
Correct.
And how can we actually support them so we can support the 25% as best as possible? And I think that's where we need to innovate, we need to adapt, and we really need to think about the strengths of what that we have right now and how can we build out these systems for into the future.
Yes.
So age-friendly, basically thinking age-friendly for the future.
Correct.
You know, building those cities and communities and societies that are focused on protecting and supporting the older persons.
Right.
Sure.
So I think that, you know, I love the way that the conversation is going, and I'm going to take this as an opportunity to remind the patients who are attending, as you're talking about community and you know, networking and so on. If you are here and you are a professional and you do want to share your LinkedIn profile, you can share your LinkedIn profile within the chat so that others can connect with you. If this is your area of expertise and you're a professional in this area, please share your LinkedIn profile in the chat. And I'm seeing patients are putting in the chat as well the names of some places or some associations or societies where persons can go in order to have that community and socialization and networking. So I'm seeing some, for example, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Responsible Persons. I'm seeing church connections. So I'm also going to ask the persons who are attending, if you want to contribute to the conversation, if you do have a society or an association or a group where you think that older persons are able to meet and connect and to continue that community building, please put the information in the chat as well so that others are able to benefit from that. Because I understand as persons get older and their friends and family are, you know, passing on, moving, etc., it becomes very difficult to hold a community together. All right. So I'm going to ask another question. So we talk about, you know, the mature persons, and I know, Chelsea, you would have indicated that a lot of your persons who are your clients, you know, would have made massive contributions, right, during their work life. What contributions can older adults make at work or in their communities, given their experience and their wisdom that they would have accumulated over the years? Because we're making it sound as though, you know, you just, you know, mature and you get old and you sit there, and that's not the case. There is a lot to give back. So given their experience and their wisdom, what contributions do you think that they can make?
I could answer that, especially as the CEO of a business that has been designed by older persons. And the reason being is because when you innovate and you design, one of the biggest things for me is actually allowing the persons that are receiving the service to give their contribution. And my company, Live Health, is actually designed by the persons it serves, because they love that contribution. I love the feedback, and they love to be a contributor in that space, and also allow that opportunity to them to impart their wisdom. And it's to them we need to look right now as we look into the future. They are the ones that are actually going through it now, and they're the ones that have the business acumen in whatever capacity, whether it's business or not. They're the ones that can really build the future for the aging populations that to come. And those are things that we will look towards. You know, we have to build out aging in place initiatives, make public spaces more accessible. We spoke about community programs, you know, build more greater community programs, but also allow the community programs to truly integrate those older persons. So the older persons are able to mentor, volunteer, and truly participate, because their wisdom and the way that we're going to overcome the aging pandemic, if you want to call it, is through their wisdom.
Absolutely. I love how you phrase it, Chelsea, you know, where you say that your company is designed by older persons for older persons. And I feel like that's the biggest contribution that we can see with these people with their experience. It's kind of that thing called diversity of thoughts, where you create multi-generational teams to foster innovation, improve team dynamics and organizations. And one of the biggest contributions I think that these older persons can make is also at a governmental level, where they can put things in place like age-friendly cities, you know, cities that allow certain walkways, they're safer for older persons, creating green and blue spaces so that now, you know, you can decrease that isolation, that depression. You're going out there in nature and you're having a place that you can totally enjoy. And then having things in place such as aging in place, you know, that would be very important. And outside of just having their contribution from experience, I think that they will do very well still in leadership roles. You know, in medicine, when doctors retire, they tend to come back into consultancy and into mentorship. And I felt like the reason I am where I am now is not necessarily because of the books and the cases that I had to go through, but it was the mentorship that I had throughout my 10 years. You know, that mentorship is what got me to the place I am now. And so there's no reason for ageism and just pushing older person to the side because it's time for retirement. We need to find ways to incorporate them so that the workplace remains ethical, the experience keeps flowing, and the workforce is also stable.
So I'm going to
Yeah,
ask you a
I
question
agree,
here
yeah.
about retirement age, because I like how you brought that in. What are your views about the retirement age as the proportion of folks older than 60 increases? And I know that we have 60 and we have discussion about 65.
Mhm.
But what are your views about the retirement age? I know that you would have brought in the perspective of them coming back as a mentor. I also hear persons returning as consultants. What do you all think about that? And
I don't
maybe
think
one day-
the retirement age should always give room for somebody to come back, I think. I don't think it should be something that is so cut and dry that you retire and then you just disappear and fall off. You should be allowed to come back as long as you're cognitively able and physically able to still perform. And then there's so many other areas. So if we have an aging population and we're going to have a deficit in working age people, why aren't we tapping into this resource that we have, which is being able to fill gaps that can be filled by older people who have the experience, who have the know-how? So, you know, I just think that we've just created this age and decided, well, you're gonna go home and you're gonna just sit in a rocking chair and that's gonna be it for the rest of your life. And that has such a negative impact on the older person as well. So, you know, we have to really rethink, because we're going to reach to a point where we don't have the resources, we don't have the workforce. And so we're going to have to tap into what we know we have available.
I believe that the retirement age will have to increase, but I think the retirement age, I don't like the concept of the word retirement age in the way that we think, okay, you're going to retire and then that's it.
Yeah,
I
retire.
think it needs to become a transition point. It needs to be that maybe age that they say, okay, I've lived the last 60, 65, 70 years doing this. This is a new me. Not this is a aged me. This is a wiser me. And now let me reflect on that age and let me pivot into where I need to go, right? So we need to move away from this word age where people think that now it's time to come and sit down on a chair and enjoy their retirement. By all means, you deserve to enjoy everything that you've worked towards and really stop at that age and say, I've done it, I've reached here, and now let me pivot so that I can continue to contribute and
Correct.
continue to live.
I'm a little split on this one, and I don't mean to go against you. But first of all, I do not feel as though persons should have to retire at a particular age, because for all the years that they were working for a minimum salary. So now it becomes an economic necessity. So I feel as if when you talk about retirement age, it should be flexible, but it shouldn't be that you are forced to do it. And there are a lot of persons returning, not because of the joy of work, but because on a retirement salary, they cannot afford their rent, they cannot afford their electricity, their water, food, like just simple needs. And like for me, I think that the problem is not just a retirement age, but the problem is also the minimum wage. Persons need to be paid what they deserve, and then persons need to be given a flexible retirement model. So if you decide to go into retirement, let's say at 60, and you wanted to come back just for that personal fulfillment, that you should be able to, but not that you have to come back because of an economic burden. So I think that's how I feel about it.
And I completely agree. But it's also building those support systems for them. So we're all the youth, right? And we have all worked with elders within any institution that we've ever worked with. And how do we enable them to continue? And here you're saying that they're being almost forced to go back into work after retirement. How do we support them? Like, you could talk about that person in the office. He grew up with a different childhood to me. He experienced life in a different way to me. Just because he's maybe not skilled in ChatGPT and AI doesn't mean that he doesn't have something to contribute. So how could we support him to overcome those challenges? Maybe he needs an assistant, etc. So it's also building out that. So it doesn't come like a force. It actually becomes a joy. I've reached this phase and now I'm going to transition into the next with support.
And that's where the successful agent comes in as well, because we started making those choices from that early age. So as soon as we started working, we should be preparing for retirement. It's not something you start preparing for when you're in your 40s or your 50s. It's with that first job, you start preparing for retirement. And so if we don't have the supports, services, the systems in place to ensure that people can prepare for retirement from the minute they start working, then we end up with people having to go back to work by force and not being able to make that choice. I will cruise or I will go back to work. So that is something that we need to, as you said, Chelsea, we need to consider and put things in place. The supports have to be there from early.
So I love, sorry, Dr. Belgrave-King, you want to add?
No, I'm just saying, absolutely. Like, the discussion is great. I absolutely agree with both Chelsea and Wanda. In my mind, I just started to think about the school system. Is it a necessity for it to be a part of the curriculum? When I did my geriatric training, we specifically spoke about retirement, and it kind of changed my whole mindset on what is retirement. Because for me, I always saw retirement as, oh, this joyous thing, but not recognizing so many people are fearful of it because of different barriers and different challenges that are set up. And as Chelsea said, what if they return and just can't do it because the system is not supportive enough? The system has turned to AI. What is it going to turn to in the future? You know where I'm coming from? So it just makes me wonder if it has to be now at a curriculum level where you help persons to retire gracefully.
Right. So I really like the way that this conversation is flowing and the direction. And so I want to actually ask a question that has come from COSTAATT's president, Dr. Keith Nace. And his question to the panel is, what institutional frameworks do Caribbean governments have in place currently to support healthy aging and to support the population in this direction? And maybe what else do they need to do in order to support if they don't currently have it?
Well, that's a good one.
I hear the sigh from the entire panel.
And that is quite a loaded question. So what I'll say is, because a part of our training, we do a lot of governmental and policy factors, and I can only speak to the Bahamas, but I'm sure it kind of extends across the Caribbean. And one of the first things that the governments have in place is what we call age-friendly cities. So if you drive around, you might not realize it, but in terms of housing, most places have government houses that we call it over here, where if you don't make a certain amount, you may be able to apply for a government house. And so as a result, they're trying to provide your basic needs. Another thing is public transportation. You might not see it as an age-friendly city, but it is, because what if that older person has to get to the doctor's office? You know, most doctor's office, the hospital, for example, are always in locations that have some type of access to public transportation. And so that's very important. Earlier, I kind of alluded to the whole green and the blue spaces. And so if you drive around certain communities, especially, you will see a local park. You will see some benches. You may see, wherever you live, you may see rivers or lakes, depending on where you're at. And all of that structure is a part of creating a more friendly environment as we age. And then that whole concept of aging in place. Now, this is one that is kind of a ticklish and very hard to deal with, because it looks at pension reform. You know, we were speaking earlier about the age of retirement. That is only a tip of the iceberg, because when you look at pension reforms, you're now looking at things like how much people are retiring with. You know, we're also looking at long-term care insurance and retirement funds. Like with my husband at his workplace, having a retirement fund is actually mandatory. And so all of these are things that are being put in place to help persons as they grow. But now you're asking what needs to be done. So from a dementia advocate, I will say to you that one of the biggest things that we need now are dementia-friendly communities. We need a dementia plan in place, because a lot of the times when persons get older and they have cognitive decline, the resources are not there for them. And so now they're kind of pushed to the bottom of the list for every single thing. And so it's such a loaded question. Like, we can literally talk about this for the entire session, because
Right.
it's something so passionate to me. And so I'll give the others a chance to answer. But I think that those are three of the most important things that governments around the Caribbean especially are currently working on.
And it has to be an effort that is multidimensional,
Absolutely.
multidisciplinary, multi-everything. Everybody has to be involved, front-facing staff, just the average citizen. So much education needs to be done to, you know, to equip people to deal with persons, because dementia is something that is expected to, as we have this aging population, as expected to double. The dementia cases are expected to do the same. Yeah, because it's more popular in older persons. And so if you have this expectation as upon us, basically we have to be able to identify, not really diagnose, but identify that somebody may be in trouble. And what do we do? Do we have hotlines that we call if somebody's in trouble? I mean, I know now we just take them to the police station and hope their relatives turn up to claim them. But is there a hotline that we call where there is a concerted effort and a standardized effort that, you know, finds their relative, or do they have some kind of identifying factor? If we have to take away the stigma, and we can only take away stigma by educating. And the education is so important. So we know that we have things that are being lined up. We have, you know, policies and stuff being introduced, but are those policies considering every single aspect of how this person could be affected, and making sure that all parties are on board with the same standardized way of dealing with it, so that we are sure that you will always get a proper standard of care or a proper standard of support.
So Chelsea, just before you jump in, I just wanted to piggyback on something that Wanda said that is so important. She mentioned about when persons go missing, what are we doing? Is there a hotline? And just this year, our country introduced something called a Marco Alert. And I just hope that it can be something that's introduced across the entire Caribbean. And basically, when an older person goes missing, every single person on the island, it doesn't matter if you're a tourist, if you are a resident, you receive a Marco alert telling you who that person is, a description, if the photo is available, because now we need the community's eyes out there to help bring them home, because it just goes to show how important that person is
Yes.
every single person. And we have over 300,000 people. So in other words, we want 600,000 eyes out there looking, because that one life matters. So I think that is something that if the governments across the Caribbean can just hear, I think that would make a
Absolutely.
big difference on bringing our loved ones back home.
Yeah, definitely. Because it
I
puts
love that.
everybody in panic. Yeah, everybody
Love that.
panics, you know, so it's a fantastic thing.
And if you look at what we started this conversation with, right? We said, what is healthy or successful aging? It's really looking at all the domains of aging. This is what we're talking about now. So how can governments create policies and systems to support all those domains? So the Marco Alert is part of the social domain we spoke about, and other policies that can be introduced to really support that social dimension and that emotional dimension. And then you think of the physical dimension, and that is where home healthcare is so important, you know, mobile friendly, adapted telehealth, emergency hotlines available 24/7 to not only support the patients in their homes, but also to support, again, their families and their loved ones looking after them that are working, that they have two jobs because they're caring for their older relatives, and they're also having to work as well, amongst many other things. So I think, yes, when you think of what governments are looking at, you're really looking at building stuff for all dimensions,
Yes.
and really encompassing everything, like everything that
Yeah.
as it comes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, all the dimensions and all the persons that play a part within the healthy aging process. There is a question in the chat from a Justin Matthew, and it deals with his question is, what of the emotional strain and coping mechanisms of the sandwich generation? And I'm guessing the sandwich generation are those who are caring for their mature parents and at the same time caring for their young ones.
Correct.
And you talk about support systems. So it's not just about those who are maturing, but then also those who are supporting them. How can persons who are supporting those who are engaging in healthy aging ensure that they themselves are taking care of themselves, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally?
Self-care, self-care, self-care. Self-care is so important. I mean, you can't, as they say, I mean, it's very cliche, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're going to be pulled in all these directions, you're going to either end up feeling guilty, angry, you're going to suffer burnout, you're not going to be able to function. And then this is why, or this is one of the reasons why we have elder abuse, because people are pulled in so many directions and reach the end of their rope where the slightest thing can trip them out and, you know, push them over the edge. And so we need to, when we say we need a community, not just to raise kids, but to also see about your parents. You need siblings have to all contribute. People have to contribute and, you know, give that person, the core caregiver, a respite break, because you cannot pour from an empty cup, you know? So that's one of the things. You have to see about yourself first. And I don't mean in a selfish way, but you see about yourself first so that you're able to give the best care to those that you have to care for.
If I could speak about the two biggest challenges I have right now in my profession, is one of those things is caregiver burnout.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest thing for me to deal with, you know, seeing those caregivers that are, you know, so full of love and just trying to do everything in their power to truly care for themselves and care for everybody around them. And that's something that is very concerning, and how we can really rise above that. So caregiver burnout and social isolation of our elderly, I would say, are my two biggest challenges that I am facing right now.
And so this has to be one of the most realist questions that we will hear today. And that's because we all would either experience this where we are in the middle of the sandwich, or we will experience it at some point. And the truth is, there's no right or wrong way to answer this. There is no book that has been able to explain it 100. And so I think some of the things you have to look at is one, balance. You know, Wanda spoke about self-care, and something for me personally, balance comes in creating some type of structure, like a schedule where I literally schedule in time for myself, just 30 minutes, you know, just take care of me, whether it's just reflection, whether it's a cup of tea, but just being able to scheduling me time, but also scheduling time for my family, because you can get so caught up trying to live, whether it's get to work, drop the kids off, do everything that you have to do, school pickup, and literally forget to call those persons around you that are so important. And you also look at the village. It takes a village to raise a child, and it definitely takes a village for us to continue living. And so you're not going to be able to do it all on your own. And so you have to tap into your blood family. You have to tap into those people who were initially strangers or friends, and now they are truly that definition of family to help you. And I don't know if you recognize it, but I think the most important thing that we said the most was actually social connection, and that is what it is. I think social connection is one of the most powerful, or probably the biggest pillar when it looks at healthy aging.
And so support groups are so important as well. And this is not me putting a plug for my support group, but support groups really, really help. You could talk about anything. You make it a safe space for caregivers. You not being judged. You could say the worst thing on the planet, and people understand. Everybody on that group will understand what you're going through. So support groups, I'm a big fan of support groups.
Absolutely.
Back on that.
So Wanda, I know that you said you don't want to necessarily plug your support group, but I'm going to encourage you to plug your support group. So if you would like to put it in the chat, you can do that. Also, Chelsea, patients asking for a link to your company. So if you would like to share that as well. And also patients in the participating as the audience, if you'd like to share your LinkedIn profile, please feel free to do that as well. Just a reminder that if you do have questions, please put it in the chat. We will try to address them as we continue throughout. I'm seeing some hands up, but we're unable to take oral questions. So the questions will have to be in the chat for us to address. All right. So now I want to take like a little bit of a spin because we have approximately 10 to 12 minutes left. Given that the Caribbean population aged 60 and over is projected to nearly double by 2050, this is going to place a lot of increased demands on healthcare systems. How is technology and innovation currently transforming the landscape of healthy aging, particularly making health and wellness more accessible and personalized for older patients across the region? I know one person mentioned telehealth, but I'm not sure what else is available.
Okay. So technology, as you can imagine, is a game changer. You kind of started with the most important thing, which is telehealth. Since the initiation of COVID, especially for us over here, telehealth just kind of catapulted. And so persons on our family islands were able to access us. Persons on the island who just had access issues, whether mobility, they were able to access us. Now, the newest things that I am being faced with are smart watches and mobile apps. I have a lot of patients who will come in and say, "Hey, doc, my watch just alerted me that there was an abnormal rhythm," and then we'll do the necessary investigations, ECG, etc. And many times we are finding abnormalities, and so technology is changing the game for us. Another example for me is falls. Since the management of falls that I do here, we have a company that give our older persons fall detectors. And so they also install like security cameras in the home for these patients. And so what now we're being able to see is that patients are being able to get greater and quicker access to care. And a lot of times we stop and we think, oh, this can't happen to me. If I fall, I can just get back up. But with my last patient, she fell, and when she recounted the story, I was brought to tears because she pretty much said that she was on the ground and her relatives came to visit her like they usually do in the evening time, but she had fell at 3 a.m. that morning, which meant that she was on the ground for more than 10 hours, just praying and hoping that somebody will come to help her. And so technology is going to be important so that we don't ever see this scenario repeated again. And there's so much more things out there, but for me, those were the two top things that really stood out with the healthy aging in terms of technology for me.
And for me, it would be, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Chelsea. Oh, for me, I was just thinking that, sometimes you have people who are shut in, or they can't go out to a gym, or they can't go out to, you know, to exercise around the savannah or whatever, but they could stay at home and do chair exercises and use YouTube to the max. And it really helps, you know, or they can have a personal trainer, but that trainer could, you know, do their exercises with them online. So you still have that
I love it.
connection, you still have that interaction with somebody. And some of these exercise classes on YouTube are so exciting, and you know, you almost feel as if you're part of it, even though you don't even know the people. So I think it's really good in that respect, that you have technology to help in that way.
And using the technology to increase access, right? So for me, I can speak for myself. We have a technology company that links into our home healthcare system. And the true benefit that it does is it allows family and caregivers to actually perform to their best of their ability, but also get the reassurance they need. So that is equipped with a 24/7 hotline. And a lot of times, you know, those calls are, you know, it's not an emergency. But it's certainly an urgency or even an emergency for those burnt out caregivers at home. And also it empowers the caregivers and it empowers the patients, because for me, I'm just a doctor. I'm not with the patient every day. I'm not the eyes and ears, and I'm trying to do personalize that care for you. So it allows me to truly integrate the family unit to deliver that personalized care and truly support them. So I can't speak enough for technology. You know, I started off in medicine, but I realized if I want to achieve and build the things, build the systems for our aging community, technology was the core of it. And I think one of our biggest things to increase accessibility, and prevent hospitalizations and truly deliver personalized care is technology, and really embracing it.
So I did see a note in the chat with regards to one of the attendees who would really like to make a contribution. She's not on the panel, so I'm going to ask the panelists if we can allow just a brief 2 minutes for Dr. Jennifer Rouse to say a few words. Dr. Rouse, I don't know if you have access, if you're able to speak at this point in time. Dr. Jennifer Rouse is a gerontologist by profession, and she is one of those patients who has a lot of experience and can add to the conversation. So Dr. Rouse, I'm not sure if you are able to speak at this point in time.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Pleasant greetings to all of you. Well, I had no choice now that I'm in retirement. Listening to the lofty conversation and contributions made, I could only say, well, my living is not in vain. Thank you all. But there was one question that was posed by one of the persons regarding whether there was like a policy framework for the like the Caribbean or our nations. And yes, there was. Because, and this was in 2002, when the United Nations, through PAHO, they had the Second World Assembly on Aging, largely because of the demographic that was happening in the Caribbean, where we were aging faster than the developed countries. They were getting, they were rich before getting old, and we were getting old before being rich. So they had to swing and put a General Assembly in place. And it is out of that came a document called the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging in 2002, out of which they gave a mandate to the governments of these developing countries that they should establish an agency or a committee that is focused on the aging issue. And it is out of that that was born the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development, because the permanent secretary of that ministry was at the assembly, and she signed on. And I was the first director that established the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development in 2003. So my tenure was up at 2018. So there is a policy, there is a national policy on aging, which needs to be reviewed, of course, because that was since 2006. And we see where the demographic is now. I am heartened to hear that this discussion came into being, because it is critical. It is critical. And I smiled when I saw the statement on the sandwich generation, which when I was in office was between the baby boomers having their older parents and the Generation X. But now, recently on the television, I saw a young person, he's a millennial, and he's saying he's in a generation, he's in a sandwich generation with the Gen Zs and the ones higher up, and I started to chuckle. So you see, because the world has never seen where 5, 6 generations are alive at the same time. And because of contract work, many representatives of each generation is in the workplace. So you could just envisage what is happening. So these are real questions. These are real concerns. And we are living, I am in my 70s and I'm now in midlife. Midlife for my generation used to be 45.
Yes.
So you understand? So I am heartened and very enthused now that I've listened to all of your contributions, and we need more of this. So thanks to COSTAATT for taking that initiative, and to get the amount of viewers I'm seeing on the chat. That's great. Thank you so much for allowing me in.
No problem. Thank you very much. We appreciate your
Welcome.
contribution. And you are correct. This is by far the largest webinar that we've had for the Innovation Café series. And we are very pleased to host it. As we are wrapping up, because we have approximately 3 minutes left for the webinar, I'm going to ask each of the participants if you can just round out and close out in terms of what your thoughts are as we look to the future. If each of you could offer one key message or actionable piece of advice for our audience about living a healthier or more fulfilling life as they age, what would it be?
So for me, it would have to be that saying that I heard when I went to the UK, and you're stepping off the train and it said, mind the gap.
Yeah.
And what the reason I say that is because there's an actual gap between our current age and that older self, and it's getting closer every day. And so we need to figure out what truly matters and focus on that. So we need to invest in our physical, our mental, our emotional, our social health, as Chelsea kept saying, because the reality is if we don't have health, not even money would matter for us.
Mhm. So true.
Okay. Wanda?
I think for me,
go
sorry,
ahead, Chelsea.
Wanda.
All right, so I would say focus more on successful aging as opposed to healthy aging. Some of us or some of you who are listening may already have an illness or a condition or something that you're living with. And so in your mind, you may not think it's healthy aging, but it's successful aging. So just try to focus on the positive things of life, the contributions you've made, your successes, what makes you special, what makes you valuable. And then I just wanted to say to the persons who are in connections with older persons, who have older relatives or who care for them, be more mindful of your own ageist way of being, because we're not aware, a lot of our ageist attitudes and behaviors, we're not even aware of it. But be intentional about your own ageist behaviors and try to eradicate them as best you could.
And I would add to that one though, where, do not let age limit you. And I know it's easier said than done for me, but I do feel that one of the biggest factors is truly living and living well till the very end is living in your purpose and living in your legacy, your stamp on this world. And just because you reach the retirement age, right? We can look at Dr. Jennifer Rouse. What is that? She just said she's retired, right? But what is that, right? So it brings it all together. We're continuing to live in this purpose and continuing to make sure that every one of us, our stamp on this world, our legacy, we are built in purpose.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thank you very much to our panelists. I think this has been a fantastic conversation and discussion. We've covered a wide variety of topics. Thank you very much to everyone who participated as a guest. Just to note that the session was streamed live on our Facebook platform. So if you did miss parts of it, or if you have friends that you think would be interested in this, please guide them to our Facebook page. And we will also be editing this and sharing it on our YouTube page as well. And we will be letting everyone who registered for the event know that when these things are up on our social media platforms. So if you've missed the conversation, you haven't missed the knowledge, we will be sharing it with you. It has been recorded. I also want to let you all know that our next Innovation Café series takes place on July 30th. And in that one, we'll be dealing with the environment, social and government, and so ESG. And the panel of speakers for that one will be Nirad Tiwari, CEO of Trinidad and Tobago AmCham, Francis Bain Cumberbatch, Chief Legal and External Affairs at Answer McCall, Melanie Richards, who is a sustainability consultant and attorney, And then we have Dr. Shari Byron, who is a faculty from Spelman, but she is an ESG and regulatory alignment expert. So if you are interested, please like and follow us on our social media platforms and look out for our information with regards to the next Innovation Cafe series. So thank you very much, Dr. Sanita Belgrave-King. Thank you very much, Dr. Chelsea Garcia. And thank you very much, Wanda Williams, for contributing to the conversation today. And thank you very much. You all have a great day and enjoy the rest of the week.